The call came on a Tuesday morning, 4 days before my college graduation ceremony. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the coffee shop where I'd worked weekends for 3 years, still in my uniform, counting tips from the Sunday shift because I needed to know if I had enough left over after rent to buy my cap and gown accessories. My phone buzzed. My mother. I almost didn't answer. Not because we weren't close. We were close the way a rope and a rock tied to your ankle are close. Always connected. Never comfortable. Hey, Mom. Sweetheart. That word. She only used it when she needed something, or when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. We need to talk about the graduation. I waited. Your brother has his regional playoffs that Saturday. You know how important this is for him. Coach says there are scouts coming. My brother is 20. He plays college baseball. He has been playing baseball since he was 7 years old, and for as long as I can remember, every single thing our family did, vacations, holidays, dinner times, my high school graduation, my 18th birthday, was scheduled around his games. Mom, I said slowly, my graduation is also that Saturday. I know. But honey, this is the regionals. This could change his whole future. I've been in school for 4 years. You can walk across the stage any time. This scout situation won't come again. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after I hung up. The coffee shop's drive-through speaker crackled and beeped behind me. A woman in a minivan was ordering a large oat milk latte, extra shot. Completely ordinary morning. My entire family had just told me they wouldn't be at my graduation, and somewhere a woman was deciding between almond milk and oat milk, and the world just kept going. Let me back up. I'm 31 now. Telling this story at 31, I have enough distance to see the whole shape of it, though when you're living inside it, you only see the part of the wall right in front of your face. I grew up in a mid-sized town in Ohio. My parents are good people in the way that a lot of parents are good people. They pay their bills, they love their kids, they don't drink or yell or break things. But my brother was always the project, the investment. He was athletic and charming, and everybody in our town knew his name, and my parents were the kind of people who found meaning in that, in being the parents of that kid. I was the other kid. I got good grades because nobody was paying much attention, and school was the one place where effort had a direct, predictable result. I got a full academic scholarship to a university about 3 hours from home. When I told my parents, my mother said, "That's wonderful, honey," and then immediately asked my father if he'd remembered to sign my brother up for summer conditioning camp. I don't say this to make them sound like monsters. They weren't. They were just elsewhere. Mentally, emotionally, everywhere that mattered, they were at my brother's games. I put myself through the parts the scholarship didn't cover. Work study in the library, the coffee shop on weekends, a tutoring gig on Wednesday nights. By my senior year, I had a 3.9 GPA, a research publication with a professor in the biology department, and a job offer from an environmental consulting firm in Portland that I had gotten entirely on my own, through a career fair with a resume I had built from scratch. And now I was sitting in a parking lot being told my family wouldn't come to watch me walk. My father called that evening. He was gentler about it than my mother, which somehow made it worse. "You know how your mother gets when she's pulled in 2 directions," he said, as though the problem was her logistics, not their priorities. "And honestly, sweetheart, the drive is 4 hours with traffic. Your brother's game is only 40 minutes away. It's my graduation, Dad. We'll celebrate when you come home for the summer. We'll do a nice dinner. I'm not coming home for the summer. I have a job in Portland. I start July 2nd. Long pause. Portland? That's very far. Yes. We didn't know about Portland. I told Mom in March. Another pause. Well, we'll figure something out. Maybe we can do a dinner before you move. I said okay. I said goodbye. I hung up and I sat on the edge of my bed in my apartment, the one I shared with 2 other girls, the one with the water stain on the ceiling shaped like Florida, and I let myself cry for exactly 20 minutes. That was all I gave it, 20 minutes. Because I had learned a long time before that night, that grief for what your family isn't will eat you alive if you let it. You can want them to be different, and you can be sad that they're not. And then you have to put it somewhere and keep going. I've been doing that my whole life. I was good at it. What I didn't expect was what happened next. I had a professor, Dr. Eleanor Webb. She taught environmental policy, which was my concentration, and she had written me the recommendation letter that had gotten me the job in Portland. She was in her late 50s, silver-haired, the kind of woman who said exactly what she meant in exactly as many words as it required and never more. She wasn't warm in the conventional sense. She didn't ask about your weekend or remember your birthday. But she saw our students' work clearly, and she said so. And when she told you something was good, you believed it because she would just as directly tell you when it wasn't. I had her office hours that Wednesday, 2 days before graduation. I went to return a book I'd borrowed and to thank her, because I was leaving and I didn't know when I'd see her again. She asked if I was ready for Saturday. I said yes. She asked if my family was coming. I hesitated 1 second too long. She looked at me over her glasses. "They're not coming," I said. "My brother has a baseball playoff. They're going to that." She was quiet for a moment. Not uncomfortable quiet, thinking quiet. "Will you have anyone there?" "My roommate said she'd come. And my friend from work, maybe." She nodded slowly. "I would like to attend, if that's all right with you." I blinked. It's optional for faculty. I'm aware. I've sat out commencement for 11 years running. I find them tedious." She picked up her pen and looked back at her desk. "But I'd like to be there Saturday." I didn't know what to say. I said thank you. She said to stop thanking her and email the ticket information. I walked out of Hartley Hall and stood in the April sun and felt something I couldn't quite name. Not happiness. Something steadier than that. Like being handed a glass of water when you didn't know how thirsty you were. Saturday arrived the way important days always do. Too fast and too slow at the same time. I did my own hair. I zipped my own dress. My roommate Tess took pictures of me in the apartment hallway with her phone, in that particular way of someone who cares but doesn't quite know how to frame a photo, so all of them are slightly tilted. I still have every single one. The ceremony was held in the outdoor amphitheater. It was a cool morning, which was a relief, because the black gowns made everyone look like they were attending their own funeral. I found my seat in the alphabetical rows and looked out at the guest section, which was filling up with parents and grandparents and younger siblings who had been bribed with the promise of lunch afterward. I didn't look for my family. I knew they weren't coming. What I didn't expect was who I would see when the faculty processional came down the aisle. Dr. Webb. In full academic regalia, the kind with the hood and the velvet stripes that I'd only ever seen in photographs. She never wore it. Multiple colleagues had told me she hadn't worn it in a decade. She walked with her customary posture, spine straight, chin level, expression suggesting she found the processional music mildly beneath her. But she was there. She found me in the crowd of graduates. I don't know how. There were 400 of us, but she did. She gave me a single nod. I had to look away because I was going to cry, and I had not given myself permission to cry in front of 400 people. The ceremony took 2 hours and 15 minutes. When my name was called, middle of the alphabet, so I had plenty of time to get nervous, I walked across that stage and I shook the dean's hand, and I took my diploma cover and I looked out at the audience. My roommate Tess was on her feet, whistling, which was embarrassing and also the best thing I had ever heard. And in the faculty section, Dr. Webb was standing up too. I can't tell you exactly what that meant to me. I've tried to explain it to people since, and I never quite get it right. It wasn't just that she came, it was that she put on the regalia and she stood up and she had done all of that for one student, in a ceremony she found tedious, because I was going to be there alone otherwise. Some people show up. They just do. And sometimes those people aren't the ones you expected. After the ceremony, there was a reception on the lawn. Tess got us both lemonade. My work friend had indeed made it. She arrived 20 minutes late and slightly out of breath and immediately asked if she'd missed my name. She had, but I didn't tell her that. Dr. Webb found me near the oak trees at the edge of the lawn. "Congratulations," she said. She shook my hand, which was very her. "Thank you for coming," I said. "You didn't have to." "I know I didn't have to." She paused. "The position in Portland. Dr. Hargrove at Pacific Northwest told me they fought over your file. He mentioned it when I accepted." "Good." She looked at me steadily. "You're gonna be fine, you know. Whatever it is you're thinking about right now, the family situation, you're gonna be fine. I nodded. Not because it doesn't hurt, she said. It will keep hurting for a while. That's appropriate. You're allowed to let it hurt. But you're also going to build something real, and you're going to have people around you who deserve to see it. I didn't say anything because I couldn't. She gave me another nod. That was her version of an embrace, I think, and went to find her colleagues. I stood under those oak trees with my tilted apartment hallway photographs and my phone, and my diploma in my hand, and I let it settle. The loss and the gratitude and the strange specific grief of realizing that the people who raised you are never going to be the people you needed them to be, and somehow you survived anyway. And then Tess appeared at my elbow with more lemonade and said, "Okay, we are going to brunch and you are ordering whatever you want because you just graduated summa cum laude and that is not nothing." And I laughed and we went to brunch. My family texted that afternoon. My brother's team won their regional game. My mother sent a photo of him holding a trophy, grinning, my father's arm around his shoulders. So proud of our boy. Hope your day was wonderful, sweetheart. I looked at that photo for a long time. I didn't respond that day. I didn't respond out of anger or calculation. I genuinely just didn't know what to say, and I'd learned that saying nothing was better than saying something I'd regret. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter, and Tess and I watched a movie, and I fell asleep on the couch before it ended. I moved to Portland on the 28th of June. My car fit everything I owned, which wasn't much, and I'd found a studio apartment near the office that was small but had a window that looked out at a strip of sky and the top of a Douglas fir tree. The job was harder than I expected, and also better than I expected. The work was real. Actual field assessments, policy briefs that got read by actual state officials, a team of people who argued about methodology at lunch and meant it. I was the youngest one in my department, and within 6 weeks, I had been given my own project, a wetlands assessment up the coast, and I drove up there on a foggy Thursday morning and stood in the marsh with my field kit and thought, I made this happen. Nobody gave me this. I made it. I called my parents every 2 weeks or so. Polite, brief calls. My brother was in summer training. My mother had joined a league for parents of collegiate athletes, which I didn't know was a thing. My father asked once, carefully, if I was happy in Portland. I said yes. He said good. We didn't have the vocabulary to go any further than that, and we both knew it, and there was a kind of sad peace in accepting it. In November, about 5 months after I moved, my brother tore his rotator cuff. It was serious. Surgery, then 6 months minimum of rehab. His junior season was gone, and that was a genuine tragedy for him. I don't say that sarcastically. He had worked his whole life toward something, and in one play it came apart. I felt sorry for him. I sent him a care package, good snacks, a novel, one of those heated shoulder wraps that actually work. He texted me a single thank you emoji. That was fine. We had never been close in the way siblings are supposed to be close, and that wasn't entirely either of our faults. But here's what happened that I didn't expect. Without the baseball schedule organizing their entire lives, my parents were suddenly at loose ends. The calls became more frequent. My mother started mentioning, carefully, that they had talked about coming to visit Portland sometime. My father sent me an article about environmental policy once with a note that said, "Thought of you." I don't think he had ever sent me a news article before in my life. And then in February, my mother called and after about 10 minutes of small talk, said, "We wanted to come for your graduation, you know. I want you to know that." I let the silence sit. "We made a choice," she said. And I think about it. I think about it more than you'd maybe expect. I said, "Mom, I know it doesn't, Mom, I'm okay. I'm genuinely okay." And I meant it. I wasn't saying it to make her feel better. I was saying it because it was true, and saying true things had always felt more useful to me than the other kind. I would have liked for you to be there. But I was there, and other people showed up for me, and it was okay. "Who?" she asked. I told her about Dr. Webb, about the regalia, and the nod across the crowd, and the thing she said under the oak trees. My mother was quiet for a while. "She sounds like a remarkable woman," she said finally. "She is." Another quiet. "I should have been there." I said, "Yeah, you should have been there." I said, "Yeah, you should have been there." I said, "Yeah," just as a fact, because she should have, and I wasn't going to tell her otherwise. We talked for a little while longer, and it wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. There wasn't a single moment where everything was resolved. That's not how it works in real life, even when you want it to. What it was an opening, a small one. The kind that might, with enough care, eventually let some light through. My brother finished his rehab the following August. He lost his starting position, but not his spot on the team. He called me, which he almost never did, and we talked for almost an hour. He was different on the phone than I expected. Quieter, more honest. He said, "I think I've been kind of the worst about you, about your stuff." I said, "You've been kind of oblivious." He laughed. I laughed. It wasn't nothing. I got promoted in the spring. Project lead. My own team of 3, including a recent grad who reminded me of myself in specific ways I couldn't quite articulate, but recognized in my bones. Dr. Webb and I stay in touch. She emails. Actual emails, not texts, because she doesn't text. Maybe once every couple of months. She sends papers she thinks I should read. She forwarded me a grant opportunity last fall that I applied for and received. She came to Portland for a conference last spring, and we had coffee, and she told me about a former student she was worried about, and asked my opinion on a departmental conflict back at the university, and treated me exactly the way she always had, like someone whose perspective was worth consulting. I don't take that lightly. There's one more thing I want to say, and it's the part that took me the longest to understand. For a long time, I thought the graduation was the wound, that the specific thing that happened, my family choosing my brother's game over my ceremony, was the injury, and if I could just get past that, I'd be healed. But the graduation was never the wound. It was just the moment I finally saw the wound clearly. The wound was much older. It was every school play and honor roll recognition and acceptance letter and personal milestone that had been held at a slight angle, always tilted toward my brother's orbit. The graduation was just the day the accumulation became impossible to pretend wasn't there. Seeing it clearly hurt more than not seeing it. I won't lie about that. There was a whole period, probably that first winter in Portland, where I cried in my small apartment more than I'd cried in years. Grieving something you never had is a strange and particular kind of grief, and it doesn't follow a schedule, and it surfaces at weird moments, once in the cereal aisle of a grocery store, once in the middle of a work call, once watching a movie in which a father dances with his daughter at her wedding. But here's what I found on the other side of that grief. I found out who I actually was when nobody was watching, and it turned out that the person I was someone who could do the work and build the thing and ask for help when it mattered and tell the truth even when it was uncomfortable. All of that was mine. Nobody gave it to me. Nobody could take it away. Dr. Webb couldn't give me a different family. Tess and her slightly tilted phone photos couldn't replace 25 years of something I didn't get. My work team and my Portland apartment and the Douglas fir tree outside my window couldn't undo what was missing. But they could be what was real. And real turned out to be enough, more than enough. Real turned out to be everything. If you've read this far, I think maybe you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you have your own version of this, your own graduation, your own playoff game, your own moment of standing somewhere important and looking out and seeing the people who weren't there. If that's you, I want you to hear this. The people who should have shown up, they made their choice. You didn't make it for them, and somewhere in your life, probably somewhere you haven't fully recognized yet, someone put on their metaphorical regalia and stood up. Look for that person. That's where your real family is. Mine was a professor with silver hair and a blunt manner who found me in a crowd of 400 and gave me a nod that I will carry for the rest of my life. That was enough to build on. And I did. I used to think that what happened to me was unusual, that most families show up, that most parents, whatever their flaws, set aside a Saturday for the thing their kids spent 4 years working toward. I don't think that anymore. What I've come to understand, slowly, the way you understand things that cost you something, is that people reveal their priorities not in what they say, but in what they choose. My parents said they loved me. I believe they meant it. But when it came down to a 4-hour drive versus a 40-minute one, when it came down to my name being called in an amphitheater versus my brother holding a regional trophy, they made their choice. And that choice told me something I needed to know, even though I didn't want to know it. Here's what I've thought about a lot since then. Nobody wakes up intending to be the parent who misses their kid's graduation. Nobody consciously decides to raise one child in the sun and one in the shade. It accumulates. 100 small tilts in one direction, each one so minor it barely registers, until one day your daughter is standing on a stage in a black gown and you're in the bleachers of a baseball field 40 minutes away, and somehow that seemed like the obvious choice. That's not malice. That's a long pattern of not paying close enough attention. And the thing about patterns is that they have consequences, not as punishment. I don't believe life works like a ledger, debits and credits balancing out in the end, but actions ripple. What you practice, you become. If you practice showing up for one person at the expense of another, you get very good at that. And eventually the person you kept showing up for gets hurt and suddenly needs you in a new way. And the person you didn't show up for has learned, out of necessity, out of survival, to build a life that doesn't require your presence. That's what I did, not to spite them, just to live. And Dr. Webb, I think about her a lot when I think about what intelligence actually means. She was the smartest person I knew in a purely academic sense, yes, but the intelligence that mattered on that Saturday wasn't her publication record. It was the intelligence to see a person clearly and understand what they needed. To recognize that showing up, putting on the regalia, standing in a faculty row she'd avoided for 11 years, that this was the work, not separate from her life's work, part of it. Maybe the most important part. Intercity is like that. It asks things of you that aren't on any official list. Nobody required Dr. Webb to come to my graduation. The requirement she answered to was internal. She saw something that needed doing, and she did it. I think about the kind of person I want to be, professionally, personally, in every direction. I want to be someone who notices, who sees the person in the crowd who might be standing there alone and thinks, I could do something about that. Not because there's a reward, not because anyone is watching, because it's the right thing, and because we have more capacity to matter to each other than we usually remember to use. My brother and I talk more now than we ever did growing up. His injury took something from him that I don't take lightly. It genuinely hurt him, and watching him rebuild after that has made me respect him in a way I didn't expect. Resilience looks different when it's not attached to a scoreboard. What he's had to do in the last couple of years, retrain his arm, reconsider his whole identity, figure out who he is without the thing he'd built his life around, that required something real from him. I've watched him find it. My parents are trying in their way. It's imperfect. It will probably always be imperfect. But I stopped needing it to be perfect a long time ago, and that more than anything, more than the job or the promotion or the Portland apartment with the Douglas fir outside the window. That is the thing I'm most proud of. I stopped waiting for a different story and started living the one I actually had. That's not resignation, that's freedom. And it took everything I had to get there.